like to hike and get out. That's my time with walking and talking with God. And yesterday was a little bit chilly. So, okay. So I've been reminded I have to pray. Is that right, Jennifer? Just go. How do we know you don't live nearby? For if you do, we cannot make a treaty with you. They replied, we are your servants. But who are you? Joshua demanded. Where do you come from? They answered, your servants have come from a very distant country. We have heard of the might of the Lord your God and of all he did in Egypt. We have also heard what he did to the two Amorite kings east of the Jordan River, King Sihon of Heshbon and King Og of Bashan, who lived in Ashtaroth. So our elders and all our people instructed us, take supplies for a long journey, go meet with the people of Israel, and tell them, we are your servants. Please make a treaty with us. This bread was hot from the ovens when we left our homes, but now, as you can see, it is dry and moldy. These wineskins were new when we filled them, but now they are old and split open. And our clothing and sandals are worn out from our very long journey. So the Israelites examined their food, but they did not consult the Lord. Then Joshua made a peace treaty with them and guaranteed their safety, and the leaders of the community ratified the agreement with a binding oath. 3 days after making the treaty, they learned that these people actually lived nearby. The Israelites set out once to investigate and reached their towns in 3 days. The names of these towns were Gibeon, Kephirah, Beeroth, and Kiriath Jearim. But the Israelites did not attack the towns, for the Israelite leaders had made a vow to them in the name of the Lord, the God of Israel. The people of Israel grumbled against their leaders because of the treaty. But the leaders replied, since we have sworn an oath in the presence of the Lord, the God of Israel, we cannot touch them. This is what we must do. We must let them live, for divine anger would come upon us if we broke our oath. Let them live, so they made them woodcutters and water carriers for the entire community, and as the Israelites directed. Joshua called together the Gibeonites. Now we're at your mercy. Do to us whatever you think is right. So Joshua did not allow the people of Israel to kill them, but that day he made the Gibeonites the woodcutters and water carriers for the community of Israel and for the altar of the Lord, wherever the Lord would choose. Man, there's a lot to unpack in there, right? Interesting, man, that the first part of it was that the Gibeonites had already heard about what the Israelites were doing, right? They were already conquering, and so their immediate first thing is fear, right? So they feared destruction. They feared to be wiped out, because that's what God had told the Israelites to do, to wipe everybody out in Canaan, to take all their lands, take everything, destroy them all, right? So you can imagine if I was a Gibeonite, I might be a little bit perturbed, right? The Israelites are coming. Uh-oh, what are we going to do? So what they did, man, they devised a plan, and I thought it was a pretty good cunning plan. I don't know what I would have. I would have come up with something like. I thought that was a pretty cunning plan to save themselves, right? So, man, it was interesting. So they disguised themselves as travelers, right, from a distant land, moldy bread. Who ever thought that one up? Right? Old wineskins, man. Musty, moldy bread, man. That was a good one. I don't know if they ever went that far, right? But I've got to come up with some pretty cool ways to try and get out of this, right? Making all of the appearance that they had traveled a long way. It's interesting. In verses 14 to 15, there was an interesting telling point in the middle of that, right? It says, without consulting the Lord. Their arrogance was already ahead of them again, right? So they've forgotten about what had happened in Jericho, right? That God had done this amazing thing. They forgot that when they went to Ai without speaking to God about it all, that we were going on, okay, we got this. Man, how many times we say we got this, right? That's what I say to God. God, I need your help. The next time round, no, I got it. Okay, I don't need it now. That's what they were doing, right? And so they got defeated at Ai. And here we are, they defeated Ai finally once they actually repented to God and actually got all that sorted out. And here they are, they're doing it again without consulting the Lord. And they believed it. That must have been pretty good. They believed it. And as a result, they made a treaty of peace with them. Well, 3 days later, it doesn't take long for it to happen, right? 3 days later, we found out. Israel learned that the Gibeonites are really their neighbors. So now, I don't know what must have been going through Joshua's mind at that point, right? Interesting. I'd like to have been a fly on the wall of that one, now what? So what he does is that because it's a treaty that was undertaken or underwritten by an oath, right? They can't break the oath, right? Because it's before God. I wonder if the Gibeonites realized that was what was going to happen, right? I don't know. I just know that they were trying to save themselves. I know that, right? They didn't want to die. Made a treaty. Now they've understood, right, that now it's sworn under oath before God. They can't be broken. Could have been, yeah. But I also know that I think that word got around pretty quick about what was happening with the Israelites, right? That when they, the Jordan River being parted and then walking across that must have been a story to tell that people heard about. Right. And then the destruction, right, of Jericho, and I'm pretty sure that word had got around that what has been happening on the other side, right, of the Jordan. So the Israelites were held in awe, right, and they've already now that they've gone around and they're destroying everything and killing everybody. Now, if I was a Gibeonite, I might have been a little bit perturbed. I'm pretty sure that I would have been like, whoa, time to leave, right? So the interesting thing in the middle of all this, right, is that Israel's hasty decision to do this was as a distinct result of a lack of prayer, right? They didn't consult God. They didn't go before God and say, what do we need to do here, right? So Israel's failure to consult God before making a treaty symbolizes the consequences of relying on human wisdom over divine guidance, right? I don't know if you do that. Sometimes I go along, man, I'm like, I've got this, God, right? I've got this. That was my cry. That was my cry for the longest time. I've got it, God, right? And then God would just be a gentleman and just say, okay, go ahead, carry on. And normally when Wayne is working on his own wisdom and on his own plans, they don't normally come out very well. You understand, Basil? They don't normally come out very well. When Wayne's in charge, right? Normally it's a disaster most of the time. And then I come to God like, God, I think I messed up. And God say, So then, man, I quickly humble myself and I quickly, hey, God, I'm sorry, man. I won't do that again. It was a disastrous consequence as a result. Now, it wasn't that disastrous for the Israelites. You understand that when they were sent into Canaanite, what God's command to them was, you're going to wipe everybody out. You're going to wipe every city. You're going to destroy every city. You're going to kill everybody. This land is going to be all yours. And here they are. God has already said, this is what you have to do. And they failed because they didn't consult God, right? They made a treaty that cannot be broken under oath. Now what, right? Man, it's really interesting to me, man, because like I said, I could go in several different directions on this, right? For me, man, dependence on God through prayer is essential for making any wise decision, right? And that's what they should have done. They should have gone to God and say, what do we need to do? And God would have made sure that they would have known about any kind of plan, right, that the Gibeonites were trying to do. They wouldn't have been deceived so easily. So, as a result of that, right, so here we go, that now they know, okay, you lied to us, now what we're going to do. So Joshua goes and confronts the Gibeonites. And what do they say? We were scared. They confess that they were scared of the Israelites and their God and what he could do. I think I would have been too. But this was the interesting thing this is about God's mercy right in the middle of this. You've got to understand that there is sovereign mercy in the middle of this, right? That after he confronted them, right, and despite their deceit, they are spared and incorporated into Israel's community, fulfilling God's promise to bless all nations. Now, I don't know if they realized that what they were going to do was that when they made this treaty, that once they had done that, right, they were at this place, right, that they've now indebted them time, right? You know, and she made the decision to leave me. She made the decision to do whatever decision that she had to do. But I remember something, right? Because what I did at my wedding day, right, was on my wedding day with her, I had these two beautiful 7- and 8-year-old and an 8-year-old, right? And I knew that I was going to take on that role as their father, right? Even though I was their stepfather. And I remember at the day of the wedding, I stopped the pastor. I made my oath, right? And I made my vows, right? And I stopped the pastor right at the end. I said, stop. I said, I want these two girls to come up to the front. And I called the two girls up. And I said, I cannot replace your father. And I'm not even going to try to replace your father, but what I'm going to do to you is I'm going to be the best dad that I can be to you. I'm going to be the dad that you don't have. And then I asked the pastor to repeat the vows, and I made the same vows to those children as I made to my wife. And I remember that later on when my wife left me, I was devastated, and I remember God's just speaking to me. He said, Wayne, she broke covenant with you, but you do not get to break covenant with her or those children. You hold on, right? And that was very important to me, right? Because despite her leaving, I continued in the father role, right? I still fathered those children. In fact, one of them ended up coming to live with me while we were still separated. And we were separated for 9 years. And I maintained covenant. Why? Because I made a vow before God, and it was important to me that I honored that vow before Him. And I honored that same vow I made to those children, and they were still active in my life today, right? And so now me and my wife are reconciled here. Who am I to know, right? I don't understand what God's going to do. All I knew, I made a covenant vow that I would honor it, and it doesn't matter what she did, it mattered what I did. I held true to the vow. And here we are later on, I'm reconciled with my wife, right? And those children have always said, "You're dad." I won't say what they say about the other man. It's not that impolite, but it's impolite enough, right? So I understand the meaning of covenant in my life today, right? And I think the Israelites understood covenant too, right? So they realized that they couldn't break this covenant now that was made. That was an oath made. They couldn't do it. So instead, man, like Joshua said, okay, instead of you dying, I don't know, well, I don't think I want to die, but I don't know if I would have chosen slavehood. But, right? But that's what they chose to do. Well, you know, as a direct result of that, man, that's what they ended up doing. I just understand, like, and I just wrote this note here, that believers are called to honor commitments reflecting God's character, right? And that's what I try to do in my life, and I think that's what we should try to do every time, right? All of us, that's what we should do, honor God's commitments, man. And so, some key themes that I got out of this, right, was like the importance of prayer, right? Joshua 9:14 highlights the dangers of acting without seeking God's guidance. This teaches the importance of prayer and decision making. And I've learned a lesson now, like I don't make those wild decisions on my own as much now, right? I understand like that, man, maybe I need to consult God a lot more. And so I do that. So I never make any major decision. In fact, I don't make every decision I make in my life. It's done before God first, right? God's mercy for outsiders, man. Like the Gibeonites' inclusion prefigures God's plan to bring salvation to all nations, right? The weight of integrity, Israel's decision to uphold the treaty, demonstrates the importance of integrity, even when the circumstances change. And there was an interesting thing, like the Gibeonites acted out of fear, but their acknowledgement of God's power positioned them to receive mercy, reflecting the balance between God's justice and grace. And that's a very important point right there, man. So, So it's about honor and commitment, servanthood and humility. But there was something else that I noticed in here, right? Like it was verse 23. When I see a curse, I want to know what the curse is about. And in 23, the curse was, may you be cursed. From now on, you will always be servants who cut wood and carry water for the house of my God. The curse became a blessing for them. They may not have seen it at the time, but it was a blessing. They weren't destroyed, right? Joshua curses the Gibeonites to servitude as a consequence of their deceit. However, and this is very important to understand, right? Their servitude places them in close proximity to God's presence, as they are tasked with serving in the house of God. That's a very important understanding there, right? So while they were cursed, they were also spared from destruction. That's God's mercy right there. It's a paradoxical mercy, right? They were cursed, but yet they were saved. Their proximity to Israel's worship could lead to their spiritual inclusion and exposure to God's truth. And as I was like thinking and praying of this, that was like I was like going over this thought process. This echoes God's ability to turn a curse into a means of a blessing, right? Consider the story of Joseph, right? He declared, you intended to harm me, but God intended it all for good. We understand that there is an author of a plan in place, right? There is a plan always. The other point that on this curse was humility through servanthood. Cutting wood and carrying water were menial tasks, right? But they were essential for the functioning of the tabernacle and later the temple when it came to be built. The Gibeonites' role ensured they contributed to the worship of the true God. I don't think anybody thought that at the time. You know, here they were going to be destroyed, and now suddenly they're now inside the inner camp of God, right? They're seeing God almost, right? When God appeared, right, they were there. Oh, absolutely knew that. Absolutely. That's why they did that in the first place. They knew that if they didn't do something, they were going to be destroyed. Every man, woman, and child, and their animals, right? And their gold taken. They knew what it was. Yeah.
And their people just got moved in with their people and multiplied.
Yeah. Inclusion of outsiders, right? The Gibeonites were outsiders and deceivers, yet they were allowed to live and serve God's house. If you think about that, that prefigures the inclusion of Gentiles in God's redemptive plan, right? It's a pre-runner to that, right?
He brings Gentiles right in there with Israel.
Yep. Even though through deceit, God used the Gibeonites to serve his purposes. Paul, right, in the New Testament, Paul emphasized that in Ephesians 2:13, he emphasizes that Gentiles once far away are brought near through Christ, right? Similarly, the Gibeonites, though cursed, were brought near to God's worship. Consequences of deception was my fourth point that I wrote down. Judgment for deceit. The curse reflects the seriousness of the Gibeonites' deception. Although they avoided immediate destruction, their dishonesty brought lasting consequences for them. They were in servitude and indebted to the Israelites forever. You can see later on, though, that there's some other notes that I made that their servanthood, right, lasted for a long time, right, up until when Saul, I think it was Saul, eventually broke the treaty with the Gibeonites. Later on, right? So they would end up serving for a long, long time. God's justice and mercy, while judgment was rendered, God's mercy allowed them to live. And I sometimes think about, like, I reflect over my life a lot, right? Because I've lived a colorful life, right? I've lived a very checkered life. And there are moments, man, like when I look back, and as a recovering addict and a recovering alcoholic, I understand more the grace and the mercy that has been bestowed on me, right? I look back over my life sometimes and I reflect, and I look at key moments. Mercy, I should have died. Mercy, I should have been put in prison. Mercy, I should have died. Grace, I never got, man, it was just unmerited favor, time and time again. I'm understanding, man, like how much God loves us, man, and how much His mercy is. Even though I do things despite myself, right? You know that for me it served as a reminder that sin has consequences. And I don't always realize or understand that in the moment, right? Because I'm just living life, right? Doing what I think I want to do, right? Sometimes I don't necessarily know what those consequences may be. And sometimes I may know what they're going to be, and I convince myself that I'm going to be okay with them. Right? This is the truth, right? I'll be okay. I heard it said, man, like I go to other places and it says that like insanity is repeating the same thing over and over, expecting a different result. No. Knowing I'm going to get the same result. But convincing myself that I will be okay with the result, but knowing deep down in my heart that I never will be. That's insanity to me. And I've done that a lot, right? I'll be okay, man. I know what's going to happen. I'll be okay. I remember somebody said to me, man, maybe you're okay, like losing your house, your car, your job, your wife. And I'm like, I'll get another car, I'll get another job, I'll get another wife. As if they're throwaway, right? I remember one time I was sitting in a Waffle House, man, and there was I think that what they were trying to do was doing an intervention on me. They picked me up at 1 a.m., right, and they said, you need to come with us. And they sat down with me in a Waffle House, and I'm just eating, I don't know, what the hash browns, eggs, and I'm just hungry. I haven't eaten for about 3 or 4 days. I just want to, and they're trying to tell me about, man, you know, all these consequences. You lose all this. I said, nah, I'll get it all back. And then one man, he was a pastor out in Weatherford. And he just looked at me, he says, like, he just said it so matter-of-factly, I don't know if I've told the story. He said, Wayne, maybe you're going to be okay doing 25 to life in an American penitentiary. No. Maybe you're okay dribbling out the side of your mouth because you've had a stroke. Nope. Maybe you're okay with somebody changing your diaper because you're now a quadriplegic. No. You don't get to choose those. They are taken out of, those consequences, they are taken away from you. You carry on doing what you're doing, then one day you think that I can handle the consequences, and then one day you get consequences that you can't handle. That was a sobering moment for me, to understand that I will never have, it's not your choice if that happens. It will be what it's going to be. And then you have to deal with the consequences of that, right? I chose in that moment, man, I didn't want to suffer those consequences. So if I don't want to suffer the consequences, don't do things that will bring you consequences. What? I literally went, what? They are hard consequences. You know, and the reality is that every consequence I got was hard, man. As a direct result, I lost the best job I ever had, man. And then I convinced myself that was okay. I didn't want that job anyway. Sometimes they're just long-lasting, right? And I realized the pain I caused for people. And I liked what, Hosea 10:12 when I spoke on Sunday, I liked that, man, because it was a plowing the harness of our hearts so that we can sow righteousness so that at the end we can reap a harvest of love. Because I had a heart, I don't think I was really, necessarily my heart was always hard, but it was hardening at times, right? And God would give me gentle consequences, right? Like I'd lose a car. I'll get another car. I lost a lot over a long period of time, right? Some I'll never get back, and I caused so much pain to so many people, right? And I'm glad that I had the opportunity now to come to a place where I can come to God and to say, God, I'm sorry for all of that. I don't want to be that man anymore, right? And so part of the process for me is not to repeat that behavior anymore, right? And to push into God, right? And I want to tell you that in the middle of all that dire stuff that I was doing, the running and the gunning and thinking I was a thug over in Dallas, right? I really did. O.G. Wayne, right? Running the streets. East Dallas. Baby. That's what I would like. That's what I would do, man. Addicted to a lifestyle as much as to whatever else I was addicted to. And I thought I was something and that. We say in England, I thought I was a bag of chips and that, right? Bag of crisps, we say. Bag of crisps. My bag of crisps and all that, right? No, you're not, Wayne. God, through the whole process, though, was doing, like, I love that, man, Matthew, when it says, fall on the rock and be broken, lest the rock fall on you and crush you. I love that verse, man. Right? Because that's when God said, Wayne, it can either be painful or it can be very painful. How painful do you want it? I don't need your cooperation, but it sure would be useful. Oh, no, that's right. No, sorry. I'll take that back. He said, I don't need your permission, but I sure do need your cooperation. And sometimes the consequences are very painful lessons to us. Sometimes they're unnecessary, right? I'm really grateful that I have never got what was truly deserving to me for everything I did. That crushing would destroy me. Instead, he went through a gentle breaking process of refining me through circumstance after circumstance that allowed me to come to a place of seeking after him in a deeper way. My mornings, man, I enjoy my mornings because they are times for me to reflect and to meditate, man, and to understand the goodness of a God who loved me when I was unlovable. I never loved myself for the longest time. I remember I used to look into the mirror thinking, how can I destroy you? But God's grace and mercy is so wonderfully wrought in my life, man, that he just got to the place, he said, Wayne, it starts with some things you have to do. You have to grieve. What? What do I grieve? He said, I've lost everything. He said, there's a grieving for that. He said, but grieving what you have lost. I destroyed my career. I destroyed my families. I destroyed my children's lives. And I grieved everything that I'd lost. And then he started to say, and now, Wayne, now you'll have to learn to forgive yourself. That's the place you have to get to, forgive yourself. Because if you can't forgive you, and if you can't love you, right, then how can you love and forgive others? It must start first with me. I love these paradoxes, right, that if I want to have friends, then I must be friendly. If I want to be loved, then I must first love. If I want to be at peace with myself, then I need to be peaceful. If I no longer want to be at war with Wayne, then I need to stop fighting with Wayne. So hard, man. But it started when I went on the inward journey finally and allowed God into here, right? God kept saying, Wayne, we're going to go inward. No, you're confused, God. No, confusion lays with you. We're going inward because this is where the healing comes. You're going to let me in, right? You're going to meet that little boy one more time, right? And say hi to that little boy. Do you know how long I blamed that little boy for everything in my life? I must have done something wrong. God's grace, man, allowed me to meet that little boy one more time, right? And to forgive that little boy. The peace that I have in my life, right, is a direct result of I am quick, right? I remember somebody gave me an exercise to do about, I think I've shared it here before, about when you get the first thought, replace the first thought with about a principle that you should apply in its stand, right? So don't act out on that first thought, right? But instead, what should I do? Should I be, maybe I should be more understanding or compassionate or tolerant. Maybe, and then push that back onto them, right? And I don't have to react today in any way, right? And it's learned that in the moment, right, that I don't have to act in the moment, that in that 1 second right there, I can be okay, be silent, and be in the presence of God at that moment, right? And push into Him and say, God, I need you right now. That's the place I love to be. It's the place I long to all the time. I love to go behind the veil, man. I talk about this a lot, going behind the veil, right? When Jesus died that day on the cross, right, and that's when the veil was torn and allowed me to come into the presence of God. Once Christ is in my heart, man, I'm in that place. And that's the place I long to go. And so when I'm out there walking, that's the place I go every single morning. I'm there, talking to Him. I think that today that I can't say I'm sinless, but because I'm not, but I don't do as much as what I used to, right? I'm just in that place, right? I'm always, the first thing I do when I wake up, and as soon as my eyes are opened, it's the same thing. Thank you, God. Thank you, God. Thank you, God. I wake up with that attitude, right? I am thankful, God, that I'm alive right now. And then I go into, what can we do now today? What adventures can we get into? Because every day's an adventure, man. Oh, I said man one more time. Did you hear that? Somebody pointed out I say man quite a lot. Oh, man. Don't tell me that because I'll do it on repeat on purpose. Oh, man. So there we go. There was another one. Now I'm gonna ring them off all the time. Right? What? What I like, man, when I was looking at this here, there's another one. Oh boy, this is going to be an interesting one, right? I'm going to remove the word man from my vocabulary. Just be me, right, man? God, He uses even flawed situations. The Gibeonite servitude shows that God can redeem even deceptive actions for His purposes. My life is a living example of that. My life is a living example of what He can do and how He can redeem me, right? Humility and service, man, I like this part, right? Because I'm a servant. Serving in any capacity for God's kingdom is an honor. Do you want me to repeat that? Serving in any capacity for God's kingdom is an honor. No matter how menial the task might seem. I'm grateful for my pastor, right, back in Fort Worth, who said, you're a pastor, and I argue with him. No, I'm an evangelist. I just go and find bear. You can deal with them. I go bear hunting. You can deal with the bears. He said, no, you're a pastor. And then one time, I just said, what does that mean? And he just handed me the toilet brush and said, pastor that. And that's what I did. I served. I cleaned toilets willingly. Cleaned bathrooms, cleaned toilets. He promoted me to the broom, and I became a sweeper-upper. And then he promoted me to something else, and then I became a greeter at the door, and then he allowed me to pray, open up the meetings in prayer. And all I did was that I showed my faithfulness by serving no matter what. And when I remember when I first came and I met Jim, I just said to Jim, how may I serve you, Jim? That's all I'm here. I've said it to Maurice, and I've said it to Mike. How may I serve you? I'm a servant before anything else. God welcomes outsiders. Just as the Gibeonites found a place in God's plan, so too can anyone who comes to Him in humility. All of us have a place. All of us have a plan for our life if we're willing to ask God and to pursue it. What I do today in my life is that I read a lot of books, but one of my favorites is A.W. Tozer's Pursuit of God. The pursuit of God is an absolute for me. I ran from him for so long, right? Even though he ran after me, and I couldn't hide from him, though I tried, right? You can't hide from God. He relentlessly pursued me. But all I do now is I relentlessly pursue the one who loved me first. You know, like I think on the last time when we looked at the curses, I think in the one in the, I think it's when Jericho was cursed, right? Jericho was cursed that it will never be rebuilt, right? And I'm like, what was that about? And then I remembered at the time that Jesus cursed the victory, right? And most time when a curse happens, right, that happens, like they curse something, like in the matter of the fig tree, it died, right? In the matter of the curse of Jericho, when they tried to rebuild it, they said anybody who rebuilds Jericho will be destroyed, right? And when they tried to rebuild Jericho, they were destroyed. So typically when there's a curse, there's always destruction in place, right? And then I think we looked at the other one with Achan, right? When as a result of his sin and lying to God and hiding all the treasures, his curse was that they were taken out and stoned, right? And then you look at in the New Testament, Ananias and Sapphira, right? They were also cursed, right? And immediately, boom, dead. Oops. I would not have liked to have been around when that happened. Like, imagine being there, like, no, for real. Like, no. So, but here's a curse, right? They were cursed, but they were not destroyed. Right.
Of letting the people live. This is one example that was not on my mind that I didn't know about, to where it didn't come back later on, since they didn't destroy them like they were supposed to.
Right.
That it did not come back to haunt.
The Israelites or?
I know that.
Right.
I mean, from this passage.
Right. Right. Well, we haven't got to chapter 10 yet, but yeah. Spoiler alert. I think what I was saying, something in here is that they were very important to the Israelites at the end of the day as a direct result, right? The consequence to the Gibeonites was servitude. Literally forever, right, was what it was stated. Yeah. Now, the Israelites got a good deal out of it because they got people carrying the water, chopping wood, right? And they were allowed to, they were instrumental in building the temple later on with Solomon, right? And everything. They were instrumental in everything. It was only later that, say again? Saul broke the treaty later on with them, right? Yeah. It was because I made some notes about that. So I was looking at who are the Gibeonites. I wanted to understand who the Gibeonites were, right? So here's some quick notes that I made. The Gibeonites were part of the Hivites, right? One of the people that God commanded Israel to destroy when conquering the Promised Land. That was in Deuteronomy 7, 1-2. You'll destroy everybody, right? It was also like the Gibeon was a strategic city, a significant city, described as a great city like one of the royal cities. That comes in Joshua 10:2. Spoiler alert, right? It was strategically located and well fortified, right? So that was making it an important... So I'm going to move from man to right. You understand that, right? Okay, right. Making it an important target during Israel's conquest. Deception of Israel. Fearing Israel's military victories at Jericho and Ai, the Gibeonites resorted to deception. Pretended to come from a distant land, they tricked Joshua into making a peace treaty, right? When the deception was uncovered, Joshua spared their lives but cursed them to be perpetual servants, tasked with cutting wood. So, but as a result of that despite their curse, right, the Gibeonites became part of Israel's religious life, serving in the tabernacle and later the temple. And that suggests a form of assimilation into the Israel society. And then later on, right, so it comes into Joshua 10, right, that Joshua's battle to defend the Gibeonites, right? So when the 5 Amorite kings attacked Gibeon for allying with Israel, there was consequences for that, right? Joshua led Israel to defend the Gibeonites. How cool is that? You were going to be destroyed. You deceived us, so you get to live, and now we defend you. That's a trip. Oh, so spoiler alert again. That battle is famous for the miraculous event when the sun stood still, right, in Joshua 10. And the Gibeonites, so it's continued servitude in Israel. The Gibeonites remained a distinct group within Israel, fulfilling their role as servants for generations. And it was in 2 Samuel 21 where King Saul broke the treaty by killing some of the Gibeonites, bringing a famine upon Israel as divine punishment. Isn't that interesting, right?
It seems as though God almost gave a little bit of grace because A, they were deceived, but B, he liked the peace of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
He liked the Gentiles and the Israelites.
That he allowed them to go without being punished for that. Like Mike's saying, that
Yeah.
usually there's direct punishment for their disobedience. But in this case,
Right.
he kind of felt like it was done with a heart of love or something.
Right. Yeah, right. Yeah.
What God is thinking, but I'm just
Right.
saying he didn't punish them outright for it.
Right. Which he did in the last time, right? Like with you, there was real serious consequences, right? So just wrapping up, like, so some of this was like some of the spiritual significance of the Gibeonites was like, despite the deception, God's sovereignty, right? Despite the deception, the Gibeonites were spared and used in God's purposes. This reflects God's ability to redeem even flawed situations. Man, sometimes when I look at what my life was like and I say, how on earth are you going to turn this round? And yet God does it. No idea how or why or what, but he does it, always. Mercy for outsiders, I think I said that before. The Gibeonite story is a reminder of the far-reaching effects of deceit and the importance of truthfulness in relationship and commitments. They knew that if they told the truth, they were gone. There was no doubt about that, right? So, in part, man, I don't know. Another part of my childhood, my mother used to say to me, man, tell the truth and shame the devil, right? That was her famous saying to me, tell the truth and shame the devil. Then what would happen, like, so something would happen, like I would break something, and she'd say, who did that? I did. And I got whooped anyway, right? And then I started, like, that happened time and time again. Then I started to learn, like, maybe I need to play percentages here. Right? Who broke that? My sister did. So I wouldn't get the immediate punishment then. But boy, when the truth came out, it was double punishment, right? The servitude, while a curse, became an avenue for them to serve the living God and participate in Israel's worship. That's just truly awesome to me at the end of the day. You know, that here was a nation that was, or a tribe or people that were going to be destroyed, and they end up serving with the living God, right? That is just beyond comprehension. Well, that's all I've got for today. We're coming to the end. So I'm just going to pray and we wrap up. If you have any questions, feel free to come and speak to me. I'm always willing to answer. Heavenly Father, I just thank you for being a merciful and loving God. And I'm just grateful that I never got the punishment that I deserved. I'm grateful for your mercy and your grace that has always been bestowed upon me. And I'm just thankful, man, that in the middle of this, we can learn so much about who you are. Grace, the grace of God. I love you, Lord, and I just I lift up again the people who are sick at the moment and bring healing to their body. And I thank you for your love to me, and I thank you for the love of this church, and I thank you for the people in here who I'm beginning to love and to know. Bless them as they go about their week. In Jesus' name, amen. I've got to learn to bring